Good afternoon, good evening, or good night, boys and girls. This is Mr. Cuppy coming to you straight into your homes from Tarnley Elementary School for this week's Mr. Cuppy's Weekly Reloud. Now, excuse me. Now, this week, what I chose is a book that is going to help us understand a little bit about Thanksgiving. And this book is called The Very First Thanksgiving Day. Now, the author is Rhonda Gowler Green. Now, what is an author again? What does an author do with a book? Do you guys know? What is it? Say it one more time. Exactly. So the author is the person who writes the book, who writes down the words that are in the book. Now, this book is called The Very First Thanksgiving Day, and I do want to let you know about one word in here that is used quite often, that the author chose to use this word for a very specific reason. Now, the word in here is Indian. Now, you might know that word in the year 2015, which it is right now, isn't really used very much to talk about Native Americans. Now, Native Americans are the people that were here in the United States before the Pilgrims arrived and before we had our colonies and before our country was a country. They are referred to as Native Americans. But back then, in the time of the Pilgrims didn't know that. They thought that they were called Indians. So they used the word Indians quite a lot in their journals and in their writings, so the author chose to use that word Indians instead of the word Native Americans. But now it's 2015, so the appropriate word, the correct word to use for you is Native Americans. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading The Very First Thanksgiving Day, and I want you just to sit back, relax, and listen to a book being read to you. This is the very first Thanksgiving Day. This is the food gathered and blessed, the corn and sweet berries, the wild turkey dressed, shared on the very first Thanksgiving Day. These are the Indians, skillful and strong, who knew how to live through the winters so long, and ate the food gathered and blessed. These are the Pilgrims who farmed the new land, who steadfastly labored and toiled by hand, and learned from the Indians, skillful and strong. These are the houses built in straight rows that stood in the hot sun and harsh winter snows, and sheltered the Pilgrims who farmed the new land. This is the harbor, marked by a huge stone, where first steps were taken to chart the unknown, not far from the houses built in straight rows. This is the Mayflower ship in full sail, that weathered the rough seas, the wind and the hail, and docked in the harbor marked by a huge stone. This is the ocean that never would end, that sometimes was foe and sometimes was friend, that carried the Mayflower ship in full sail. This is the land where it all began, the land where a brave group made ready their plan to travel the ocean that never would end, that sometimes was foe and sometimes was friend. that carried the Mayflower ship in full sail, that weathered the rough seas, the wind and the hail, and docked in the harbor marked by a huge stone, where first steps were taken to chart the unknown. Not far from the houses built in straight rows that stood in the hot sun and harsh winter snows, and sheltered the pilgrims who farmed the new land, who steadfastly labored and toiled by hand, and learned from the Indians, skillful and strong, who knew how to live through the winters so long. And ate of the food gathered and blessed, the corn and sweet berries the wild turkey dressed. Shared on the very first Thanksgiving Day. Whoa, that was a pretty short read. Yes, that was a short one, boys and girls. But I want you to remember, if you listen to Mr. Cuppy's Read Aloud, to remember some things that you heard in this story. Because as you get older and as we learn more about the real Thanksgiving, you're going to hear that some of the stuff that you heard in this book isn't true. But some of the stuff you heard in this book is true, but a lot of it is not. Like, did you know that the main protein that was eaten during Thanksgiving was not turkey? There was a lot of weird things, different things, some things that you may never have heard of that we're that we're going to do some close reading on Wednesday to figure out what was the real first Thanksgiving meal like, what was served, who was invited, and we're also going to find out and learn how incredibly important the Native Americans were to the Pilgrims' survival. Because if it weren't for those Native Americans helping the Pilgrims, teaching the Pilgrims, showing the Pilgrims how to survive, well, the Pilgrims would not have. So we owe a lot of thanks to those Native Americans that helped those Pilgrims during the first Thanksgiving. You're going to find out lots and lots of different facts. And as you get older, you might find some things that kind of make you mad or they kind of make you sad about the real Thanksgiving. Okay, boys and girls, thank you for listening in to Mr. Cuppy's Weekly Read Aloud this week. Now, I normally say that you can sign off as Mr. Cuppy's Weekly Read Aloud for your nightly reading, but since this week you have a very short book and it was a very short read, I am not going to allow this for your night of your nightly reading. So I do expect some nightly reading that's 20 to 25 minutes done for Monday and Tuesday. But if you did watch the weekly read aloud, please have a parent or a guardian give a real quick signature next to it, showing that you got this done, boys and girls, and you listened to Mr. Cuppy. And thank you for tuning in and listening to me read you a book out loud. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed reading it to you. Have a fantastic evening, and I will see you tomorrow.